watching St. Louis. The best in the U.S. The best in the world. Only one will be king. The Sinquefield Cup.
We've reached the final round here at the Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis, and the excitement is palpable. It's an energy that's just absolutely electric. We see people coming from all over the globe, chess journalists, chess fans. They're all here to see some of their heroes in action, including world #1 Magnus Carlsen, although we've actually got 3 players today who are within striking reach of the Sinquefield Cup. It's absolutely thrilling to be able to bring you the games today with our commentary. We're taking a look at the St. Louis Club. We also have the World Chess Hall of Fame across the street. This is 5 years of history being made here, and this is really American chess history in the making right now.
Absolutely. The club is packed. I couldn't come down without getting all kinds of requests for autographs and cameras, and I'm not even one of the players, Jen.
Oh yeah, me too. Yesterday, some guy asked me to sign his abs. So
whoa, there you go.
I'm Jennifer Shahade. This is Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, and along with Grandmaster Maurice, we're bringing you all the action today here at the final round of the Sinquefield Cup. But let's look at what happened yesterday.
The big game on board 1 was Hikaru Nakamura, just a half a point behind Magnus Carlsen, needing to win. Nakamura was unable to press the world #1, and the game ended in a draw.
I think it was a very well-played game, both in attack and defense. None of us could avoid the repetition without weakening our position, so it was a pretty logical draw.
In the other matchup, world #2 Aronian hoped to defeat tailender Kamsky, but in the end he was under pressure and the game ended in a draw, setting up a big final matchup between the world's 2 best players.
I don't want to go home and think about missing my chances.
Well, it's sports day in America. Tiger Woods making a run at the BMW Championship, the Manning brothers facing off later in their big football rivalry, and of course, Yankees-Red Sox, one of the most storied rivalries in all of sports. But hold up, it's a new tradition, the Sinquefield Cup. Final round action with world #1 Magnus Carlsen going against his main rival on the rating list, Aronian, both of them vying for first place. And let's not forget Hikaru Nakamura, America's #1 player. With a win today, he could actually hold the trophy by himself or be in a tie for the playoffs. We'll see what happens in final round coverage here at the Sinquefield Cup. Jen, back to you.
And let's take a look at the standings as they are after 5 rounds. We've got Magnus Carlsen in first place with 3.5 points, so he has a chance to win this tournament clear if he wins. Half a point behind, we've got our local hero, Hikaru Nakamura, 3 points. Best player in the U.S., also one of the best in the world. Half a point behind him, Aronian, who has recovered from an early blunder in round 1.
Exactly.
And then we've got Kamsky, who has secured last place. And our Carlsen-Aronian matchup today will be critical.
Right. This is the marquee. This is the marquee game today.
And Carlsen playing with the white pieces, and a draw will secure him at least a playoff, though he said in an interview that he was going to press. Now we've also got Nakamura playing against Kamsky. We've seen these 2 battle before in the championship. Nakamura now in a must-win situation is going to try his best to make things very interesting against Kamsky.
Absolutely.
Now, in the last time they played in a must-win situation, Nakamura responded to Gada's E4 with the Sicilian.
It was an open Najdorf, and it was a really, really combative game that Nakamura did win.
And the Sicilian is a great opening when you need to play for the win.
Exactly.
And in fact, that is what happened. Nakamura has repeated his U.S. Chess Championship victory opening and is going for another lap.
Exactly. So let's see how here in this dramatic final round of the Sinquefield Cup things unfolded. Again, Kamsky, the current U.S. champion, playing his nearest rival in America, opened up e4. And with this move, we have the Sicilian, knight f3, d6, d4, going for the open Sicilian. And as you say, this is leads to the most dynamic play of any opening
and the Najdorf in particular.
And the Najdorf in particular.
Now, in that game that they played in the U.S. Championship, Gata played 6a4, which is kind of a little bit of an offshoot line. That being said, he usually he can also play bishop e2 in conjunction with it, but this time he played much more topically. He played the move 6 bishop e3, which is one of the most popular moves in the opening.
That's right.
Called the English attack. And
exactly.
The idea is that often you're just going to play f3, queen d2, and queenside castle, and almost treat it as though black played a dragon.
Yes, and just playing as white for this kingside initiative, and as you just mentioned, white skedaddles over here to the queenside with his king. Against bishop e3, Garry Kasparov blazed new paths after bishop e3 with this move knight g4, and a lot of heavy theory commences after this sequence of moves.
Right, this is only one of many lines black could try. It's the most it's not, I wouldn't say it's the most aggressive, it's the most concrete though. But black also plays e6 and e5 here.
That's right.
Knight g4 trying to instead immediately take advantage of the fact that white hasn't played f3 yet and has to put the question to the bishop.
And the players have been playing rapidly.
You know, it's funny. If I was Gata, I would consider, just because Anaka's in a must-win situation, I would consider after knight g4 the move bishop c1 just to really annoy him. Because that's like a little perpetual.
Yeah, you mean the move bishop c1, knight back to f6, and a repetition, a very early repetition to annoy.
I mean, it's really just pure psychology because Nakamura absolutely can't take a draw, so he would instantly be forced to play either e5 or e6, correct?
Right. Yes.
And that might have been a little clever psychological trick on Kamsky's part. What do you think, or do you think it's too sleazy?
No, I just wouldn't have done it just from the point of view that being in Gata's shoes, I believe in sportsmanship and playing fearlessly and saying, okay, I know the tournament situation, I know I'm doing badly, but I want to give you a fair shot and let's play a full game. Also,
true, although I don't think it would be that unsportsmanlike, only because it would just basically force Nakamura to play a line that he maybe hadn't prepared as well. Because Gata knows that Naka couldn't play it, couldn't go for the repetition, so he would have to choose either e6 or e5 instead.
You can't play e6 because the knight is hanging.
I mean he would have to go back. I'm saying like after bishop c1,
right?
Knight f6, bishop e3,
right? He
would have to choose either e6 or e5 here.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, but maybe Gata likes the lines with knight g4. That's another possibility.
And I think he does. Okay, let's go back through it for just a second and how they got here. Again, it was the open Najdorf.
You know, a little bit of disagreement about whether that's sportsmanlike or not. Let us know what you think about these games and about these issues here in the critical last round. Don't forget to use our hashtag SINQCup, S-I-N-Q Cup.
Exactly. So, bishop g5, this very forceful variation. Neither grandmaster ducked these mainline discussion, bishop h4, and after the move g5, bishop g3, the idea from White's point of view is he has weakened the square f5, which makes a nice outpost. If White can secure that outpost, he's going to have an edge. On the other hand, Black, with this move, bishop g7, he secures a very nice diagonal for his bishop. So contrasting styles here, h2, h3, knight drop back to f6. And let's see, we have caught up with the players. Still a lot of theory from this position going forwards. The most common move is queen d2.
And let's take a look at our marquee matchup. As you pointed out, we just couldn't take our eyes off this exciting Sicilian.
Exactly.
Even though the Carlsen game is the one that could decide the championship, and rather the Sinquefield Cup outright.
Right.
And this looks like it's actually repeating Nakamura Aronian from round one. So we went into a martial type position. Let's take a look.
An anti-martial, yes, with a Ruy Lopez. This is the signature move, bishop b5 on move 3, that gives the opening its name.
We've seen a lot of Ruy Lopez's in this tournament. So
Yeah.
for those of you who are trying to study this opening, this event has been quite a treat.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's tough for amateur players because I think E4 is more popular at the amateur level, but a lot of the Super GM tournaments sees quite a lot of D4s and C4s. So
Yes, and World Championship matches as well, that's right.
So this tournament's been kind of nice in that.
For E4 players. I'm a
Okay.
D4 player, so I don't mind it when they issue E4. On the other hand, I think that these classical lines of play that we're seeing, this is the most classical opening position in chess. It's really good and beneficial for amateur players and professional players to have these classical defense in your repertoire. So finally, I just want to go back here for this moment. With this move, Rook E1, what this move does, Rook E1, is it defends this pawn on E4 and it sets up this threat of bishop takes C6 followed by this capture of the pawn on E5. And that's why this move B5 is automatically played in most Grandmaster games to dodge that threat.
Now, it's interesting that actually Carlsen's last victory, I think, against Aronian was in this line, but instead of the main lines with Rook E1, he played D3.
Right,
And
the
that
slow
was, yeah.
method, slow treatment.
And that was in the London Chess Classic. So here, instead, perhaps thinking that Nakamura's game was quite pleasant, he decided to follow suit.
Right, yeah, Hikaru found a little chink, a dent, if you will, in the defensive armor of Levon Aronian, and played for this position and got a good position out of it. But this move D4 takes E5, okay, still pretty standard, anti-martial. There's so many choices, of course, but D takes E5, Queen takes, and immediately Magnus traded queens, going for an ending and taking a lot of the life out of the position from Aronian's point of view. I think Magnus is basically, with this queen trade, saying, I'm trying to secure my tournament position and to reduce the risk of losing this game. So queen takes, rook takes, knight d2, and have more moves been played? Yes, they have. I believe h7, h6 was played by Aronian, stopping any possibilities of knight on f3 to g5, and then Magnus trotted out this move a4, a5. Ooh, very interesting strategic idea by Magnus here. What he's aspiring for is the move bishop a4 to attack this knight on c6, and as we've seen before, try to capture this pawn on e5. So early things are happening here as Aronian has a little problem that he's going to solve. How he's going to defend that pawn on e5 is going to be a critical question.
And the interesting thing is that this game has followed the Nakamura game up into move 10, where instead of taking with the knight, which led to a richer middle game, we now have an interesting end game where white has a nice ball. But
Right.
that Nakamura game continued instead with knight takes e5.
Right.
And then I suppose the difference is that white decided to stay in the middle game because maybe he played knight bd2 first, I think.
Right,
But,
and then knight d7.
but for those of you watching at home, one of the most obvious questions here is why not, if black took with the knight, why wouldn't white go for the endgame anyway?
All right.
And I think that maybe one of the reasons is that, that knight on c6, you want to keep more pieces on the board in order to have like a real pool in this. And furthermore, that knight on c6 could end up looking a little bit awkward. What do you think the reason is?
I think that this ending with knight takes e4 isn't that bad. In other words, this knight on c6 is not as effective as this knight on
Right.
f3. And so the trade of knights is ending, doesn't give white that same advantages that he was getting in the earlier games. Yeah.
Still a tiny pull, but feels like less for white because that bishop coming to b7 now will be directly hitting the pawn on e4. And even in this position, knight takes e4 is a little bit of a threat.
And also keep in mind, when the two knights were on the board, there was this idea of knight f3 to g5, and Aronian had to spend an entire tempo to stop that threat.
All right, and we've got Grandmaster Maurice Ashley with some thoughts on a Carlsen Aronian as well.
Indeed, Jen. Well, the last time Aronian faced a Carlsen in the Ruy Lopez, he ended up losing, and he must have bad memories of that game. It was, as you mentioned, in the London Chess Classic, and Carlsen really showed some fine technique and power chess in the end of that game. If you take a look at this position, you see that Carlsen is already ahead by a pawn in the position, his rook being under attack by a bishop, but he simply ignored it with the move pawn to g6, sacrificing an exchange here. But if Aronian had actually captured this piece, then after d takes, he would have had these two pawns to contend with. No way to stop them, as a matter of fact. Trying to attack this pawn and stop it from going forward would have been met by this move, knight takes f5, and suddenly black's position is just frozen. He could maybe bring his king over, but that's not going to help. Pawn up, and look at this dominant position Carlsen would have had. King coming back over, this king marching up, and this could have been a nice finish as well. If the king goes here, look at this line, knight takes, and if pawn takes, pawn up, and suddenly the pawns alone rule the chessboard. He decided to avoid that line after this move, g6, and he dropped back with bishop to g8, but now this pawn being on the board was just too dominant. Desperation time, f4, king takes f4, trying to get the rook behind, but the white pieces just marched in easily, creating a pass pawn of his own. But after the move, rook to f6, rook e2, and then this rook down to f8 with check, he resigned, realizing that if he had blocked, knight takes, pawn takes, and now the move c7 check, picking off that rook, and because you have to take this pawn, and then the bishop's under attack, he's going to get behind the pawn. So a horrible memory for Aronian that he has to erase from his mind so that he could win today and have a chance of winning the Sinquefield Cup. Back to you, Jen and Yas.
Oh boy, trying to win this position with black against the world's #1
it's a hard task. It's a hard task. And chess grandmasters have great memories. We remember, I'm going to say, thousands of patterns. And the thing is, in this particular opening, both players, both Levon Aronian, the world's #2, as well as Magnus, the world's #1, have a lot of experience. This is a line that they're used to playing, and they both know the patterns exceedingly well. From black's point of view, in this position they have on the board, is this pawn on e5 is a potential weakness. And usually what black has to do, you mentioned, Jen, there are ideas or even issues with utilizing this rook on d8 so that you could play a knight takes e4 with a back rank check at a particular moment. Black has to play very active with his pieces, and the move bishop e7 c5 is the type of move that really fits into the position for black, as he wants to remind white of ideas like knight g4. The bishop on c5 takes up a very active post, putting pressure on the f2 pawn. And I think he's actually played it. Yes, he has. So he has played the move bishop c5, and now Magnus has to carefully consider his choices. Should he play the same waiting move with the move h2, h3, as did Aronian a moment ago? Aronian played h6 to prevent knight g5. Maybe Magnus plays h3 to prevent knight g4. So the player's still jockeying out of the opening in this, the crucial game. Obviously, if Magnus can win, the other game between Gata and Hikaru doesn't have an impact on first place. If Aronian wins,
then
opens up the door for Hikaru to go clear first. Wow.
Yeah, that would be astonishing and a big thrill for the St. Louis local fans. Now, it is true that Levon is playing in some ways for a possible jump in prize money. So Let's take a look at the prizes here at the Sinquefield Cup. Now, the first prize will not be split. The winner of the Sinquefield Cup will get 70 grand.
Got it.
But the other prizes will be split if there's a tie.
Right.
So, second place is $50K, and third place is $30,000. So, Levon also has something to play for in the sense that if he draws this game and Nakamura loses, then he can also
gain $10,000
exactly.
With the split of second and third.
So there's something else to play for there. But I do feel I totally understand. Levon yesterday said he's not going to play any differently based on the tournament situation. But you do wonder, because there's just like such a big difference between drawing. The difference between losing and drawing, both financially and prestige-wise, isn't that high. But the difference between winning and drawing is massive.
That's right.
So I wonder if there's anything he could have done with his openings. I know he always plays e5,
right.
but it does make you wonder, isn't it cool that Nakamura has a Sicilian up his sleeve for situations like that? Even though he's not as high-ranked as Levon, it almost seems that his repertoire in this case is more suited to the tournament situation.
Absolutely. Hikaru has a broader opening repertoire, and in a sense, Levon is a specialist, if you will, in the classical king-pawn's defenses. So you go with what brought you to the party, and Levon, as you say, may have liked to have the opportunity to play something a little bit more daring and dangerous, but he was true to himself in this particular game.
Sure. I mean, he is number 2 in the world. He doesn't want to lose that ranking either, so that's another consideration. We've got Grandmaster Maurice Ashley for some thoughts on this discussion.
Well, following right with what you said, Jen, about Hikaru Nakamura having a Sicilian, the time that he played this exact variation against Kamsky, that is the Najdorf, he has had a great time of it. He won the game and must be having good memories, and Gata with bad memories. Let's take a look. This came from the U.S. Championship last year, and this was the critical position. There was all to play for, and Nakamura, with this super sharp position, having already won an exchange, decided right at this moment was the time to give it back with the spectacular sacrifice. Rook takes on d5, pawn takes on d5, and then bishop captures on a5. Of course, the knight cannot capture because it is pinned to the rook. After rook to e7, he played the very nice move, bishop back to b6, protecting his rook and preparing to march the pony down the board. The pawn went to d6, but now the move pawn to a5 was played, and suddenly you couldn't advance this because there was a pin happening on the b7 square. So after king to g5 by Kamsky, pass pawns must be pushed. As we all learned in grade school, the pawn just marched down the board to a3, and then knight to d8, a bit of desperation, hoping for some tactical tricks. Nakamura would have none of it, just simply played a2, and after a little trickery, knight e6 check, king to h6, and then knight g5 with some kind of idea. Nakamura said, I don't believe you, go right ahead. One last spite check, and then king to g7, and Kamsky resigned. So as you said, Jen, Nakamura has a sharp opening in his repertoire. He's hoping for this kind of play where his tactical ability will come to the surface and maybe even win the game and give him a real shot of being in the playoffs, or maybe even mathematically winning outright the Sinquefield Cup. Back to you, Jenny. Yes.
And that is why we love Nakamura. You can always count on him to bring the fire when he needs to. And
keep us on the edge of our seats. We know it's going to be a dramatic last round. The buzz here is really palpable. And I tell you, with Hikaru, his mercurial temper, we just got to sit and admire and see what he's going to pull, if he can pull a rabbit out of his hat. Winning with the black on these elite levels is extremely difficult. So a big challenge for him, but quite capable of delivering, as Maurice just showed us.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's nice, as you see Nakamura develop as a player, he does have that more solid side to him now, too.
Yeah, they got the maturing process going on. You're not seeing so many queen h5s and things like that. But he's... I mean,
even yesterday, a lot of people felt maybe he played almost too solidly against Magnus.
Yeah.
With his opening choice that, on one hand, seemed aggressive, but on another led to too symmetrical of a position.
Yeah, it was a sedate play by him, uncharacteristically so. I think both players were hoping the other was going to take a great deal of risk. And Magnus said, fine, I'll play solidly and try to make a draw. Here we see typically Hikaru at the board, and he seems to be looking at the ceiling, but what he's really going through is these mental files of all of the variations that he's prepared for this tournament and tournaments before, of course, and he's trying to choose a variation that he feels will give him the most dynamic possibilities of pulling out a victory. Not so easy to get the exact variation you want, and grandmasters are constantly weighing this different variations as to what is going to give them the best chance of winning.
That's right. Well, I remember that U.S. championship with Kamsky and Nakamura was really thrilling because they both played such great chess.
It's true.
And then it all came down. In fact, it was even Kamsky who was impressing a little bit more throughout the tournament, but then it came down to this game where Nakamura just brought the pain.
True. And I remember being here in the St. Louis Chess Club when that championship was up for grabs, and in this very room where it was just full of spectators, and everybody, including our Rex Sinquefield, was on.
Soon.
Oh, really? Okay, we're on the edge of the seats. I mean, that was a wonderful day for chess. Marvelous.
It was a great day for chess, and it's nice to see that it's really the whole thing is expanded. Right now, we don't have a live audience, which we miss, but at the same time, we've got massive live audiences over at Leicester's and upstairs to watch the games live. But we've got Grandmasters Ian Rogers, we've got Grandmasters Varuja Nakobian, Ronan Hartsby, and Ben Feingold, and they're doing commentary at the World Chess Hall of Fame and Leicester's, because even one live commentary space is not enough to host all of the fans here for the Sinquefield Cup.
In fact, there's 3 commentary because they're following us upstairs too.
So we've lost we've come a long way from having a packed basement. Now we have a packed Central West End.
That's it. That's precisely right. So let me just bring our boards up to date as the players carefully consider their opening variations. And after this move, Bishop C5, interestingly enough, A5, Bishop C5, Magnus played this move, Bishop B3 to C4.
Now, I don't think he could have predicted Bishop C5. Apparently, this move is new. Bishop D6 had been played previously.
Okay.
So Bishop C4, a strange move. What do you think that's about?
Well, 2 things, twofold. In the first place, remember, Jen, again, you had mentioned that there was always this potential for back rank mating possibility. With this move, Bishop C4, what White has done is said, okay, I'm going to stop you from ever having those options because I'll be able to play Bishop back to F1 to defend my king. But more saliently, what I think White is playing for is to bring his knight to this B3 square. Let's go back just a moment, get rid of some arrows. The move Bishop C4 was played, and again, the idea is this bishop on C5 is, along with this rook on D8, these are black's 2 most active pieces. And let me just make a choice for black for a moment, just to show what I think Magnus is up to. He's opened up the B3 square for his knight in order to attack this bishop, so that after the bishop is driven back, Magnus can play the move Bishop E3, and in case of a trade of bishops, he's opened up this very nice outpost, the C5 square for his knight. If he could put his knight on the C5 square, White has the makings of a very nice strategic game.
That's right. I mean, we've mentioned this before, that in the Roy Lopez, sometimes the endgames are pleasant for White because of the holes that are created when you play these moves A6 and B5.
Right.
And that's why we also see that in the black side of the Roy Lopez, a lot of the victories by black have to do more with activity.
Right.
Like on Magnus's side, where he actually had a worse pawn structure, but got this mating attack against Kamsky, which forced Kamsky to give up a pawn.
Right. Exactly. And so, early jockeying in this anti-martial between Magnus and Aronian. Again, I think that Levon has a great deal of experience in this particular branch of the Ruy Lopez. And so none of these moves will really come as a big surprise for Aronian. I think if I were in black shoes here, even though I've been lauding the activity of this rook on d8, there's something to be said for rook e8 followed by bishop e6. This bishop on c4 is a strong bishop, and that bishop on c8 is at the moment undeveloped, passive. So that maneuver of trading the bishops has a very logical flow to my eyes. Let me just go back to the Kamsky game for a moment, because
yeah, sure. That one is fiery indeed.
Yeah, those players have been playing very quickly, and it's like everybody knows what they're doing here. So let's find out what happened. Again, we mentioned that this came from an English treatment of the Najdorf, knight g4, trailblazed by Garry Kasparov in this line with black. All of these are very standard moves. h3, attacking the knight and driving the knight backwards. Knight f6, bishop c4. And this is an ultra-aggressive treatment by white. What white is trying to do is cement his queenside position by putting the bishop back on the b3 square for defensive reasons, but also for offensive reasons. The bishop is really powerful on the a2 g8 diagonal. Against bishop c4, Hikaru played queen d8 to b6, attack with a direct attack against the b2 pawn, as well as an ambush idea of ambushing this knight on d4 thanks to this bishop on g7 lurking from the g7 square.
We're calling one of Bobby Fischer's favorite lines, the poison pawn, just going after b2.
It's very similar to the poison pawn Najdorf, yes.
Here, of course, bishop b3 just guards the pawn.
Well, yes, it definitely defends the b2 pawn.
And then you got to ask yourself about, you always have to ask yourself about a move like knight takes e4 in this position.
Precisely. Knight c6 was Hikaru's choice, and it seems to me he played that move very quickly, whereas I'm not completely familiar with the theory of this line. I would have certainly looked at this move, knight takes e4. The idea, once more, is that this bishop on g7 and this queen on b6 simultaneously attack this knight on d4. So if this move, knight takes e4, is possible or not, first sighting, I don't see why this move could not have been played. Do you, Jen?
It's good to try to figure it out ourselves, right?
Right. I mean, what?
Yeah, so knight d5 allows queen to a5 check, right? I mean, we do have bishop, we have things like queen f3.
Knight d5, maybe I'll just take this guy.
That's true, too. That's possible as well. I mean, I was thinking knight c7 check, but the knight's going to have some trouble getting out.
Right, and I've got a nice central pawn as well.
There's also some potential tactics on f7, but I don't know if those are going to work out for us at all, because d4 is hanging in the end, right?
Right.
So, for instance, if we were to play...
So, for example, let's say knight takes e4, queen takes d4, queen f3. I mean, at the moment, we've sacrificed a pawn, and it's not completely clear to me. We could sacrifice another pawn, play for rapid development. Is this enough? I'm not so sure. Let's take it back a step, because I'm not convinced that that would be adequate. So again, knight takes e4. What was wrong with this? You mentioned queen f3 directly as a possibility.
This doesn't seem to work at all. Well, I guess it could work, because the kind of the reason I rejected it so quickly was because I saw like you can also just play knight f6, but then knight d5 might be interesting as well. I don't know. But even this line, I don't see any mate.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, we could, again, continue this line, rook d8. This is still not convincing to my eyes. I mean, okay, black's king has lost the ability to castle, but at the moment, it seems safe enough. Remarkable. I'm not sure what the theory is, and I certainly would have given knight takes e4 consideration. But again,
well, he probably did it at home, and for some reason, because they're playing so quickly, clearly they've looked at these variations. So
precisely.
I would think maybe Nakamura considered knight takes e4 at home and then rejected it for some reason. But it does look tempting, and that's another lesson about the Sicilian. You've got to look at these things. Normally the bishop's on e3 and guarding. And yeah, I was looking at that possibility of just playing knight to f6.
Right. And now that I'm thinking about it, I believe there was a game that Alexander Grishuk played with this line. I don't remember that well because it's not in my repertoire.
Well, apparently
for
it's not
either
been
side.
played, actually.
No, knight takes e4.
No.
Okay, then I'm
hasn't
confusing.
Been, at least by strong players. That's what I'm getting word that it hasn't really been played. But after knight takes e4.
Well, fire up your engines and send us a Twitter.
Knight takes e4, queen d4, queen e2 is one possibility here, just kind of threatening d6.
Right,
But
old.
I think you looked at this variation and you saw that after castles, I mean, white certainly has some compensation, but far from clear.
Absolutely. I mean, it is as we know, the center pawns are the most vital pawns that we have in chess and crucial for our control over the center. Here, black has two center pawns to none for white. So from a strategic point of view and a material point of view, black is doing great. The only question is if he can weather the storm against his king.
And there's definitely some aggressive possibilities here after, for instance, c3, protecting the pawn, and and then trying to get in queenside castles.
Yeah, and again,
I do find white's activity to be appealing, but
is it enough?
Is it enough? It's a question. So somebody's going to try this soon after watching this broadcast.
I'm sure.
Grab that pawn, snatch it off.
Well, like I say, fire up those chess engines, send us a Twitter, let us know what we're missing, or whether this was simply too dangerous a line. And, well, maybe we'll just simply ask Maurice. How's that?
There we go.
I guess there's a reason why I have a job here, right? So I went and did the research myself. And it turns out that Kamsky's line of bishop c4 is not a popular move, not really essayed by a lot of players. In this position, instead of playing the move bishop to c4, in this position here after knight f6, actually bishop c4 is an okay line. After queen b6, the key move, bishop to b3, is actually the one that is not often played. You can simply castle here in this position. This has been played before by Garry Kasparov. We might have heard of that guy. In this line, because the pawn is not really something you can take after queen to b6, there are possibilities of trapping the queen in the position. So a lot of tactics there. Bishop to b3 has been played, and no one, at least in my database, has tried to take the pawn on e4. I think because it's fairly dangerous seeing this line after queen to f3. Although it looks as though knight f6 and you're just sort of up a pawn, even the engines are saying this position is good for white after bishop to a4 check and this move knight to d7 and simply castling, guys. How you like that? Just going down a pawn, but saying, so what? I have all the development, your pieces are locked in, and it's even giving king f8 as the best move, if you can imagine that. It doesn't like castles here because of knight to f5, and suddenly white's pieces are making a great impression on the position. So very unclear. If you want to play this with black, be ready to have to suffer a little bit being up that pawn. So far, no one has wanted to be in that kind of position, and Nakamura decided, nah, I'm not going there in the last round of the Sinquefield Cup. Back to you, Jen and Yaz.
Thank you, Maurice. And we see Nakamura rocking his Chess Club and Scholastic Center of St. Louis t-shirt, also his Kasparov Chess Foundation badge, and a patch, rather. And meanwhile, making a lot of faces. This we love. Nakamura at the chess table, thankfully not the poker table.
Right. Well, here again, we're seeing the richness of the game of chess and how grandmasters bring their little nuances and subtleties and ideas to even the most theoretical opening variation. So bishop c4, straying off the beaten path by Kamsky, queen b6, bishop b3. That's the novel, well, not the novel idea. The standard idea had been castles. Maurice cited a game that Garry Kasparov played with the black pieces, and not this move, knight takes e4, because again, what Maurice was saying was that queen f3, knight f6, bishop a4, check to the black king, knight d7. The computers felt that white's compensation for just one pawn is very good. And optically, just looking at the position, once white plays this move, rook on h1 to e1, it really does have that impression of all of white's forces being in the game. Everything's developed, everything is out, and black still has a lot of development problems to solve.
That's true in the poison pawn as well, and that didn't stop Bobby.
That didn't stop Bobby Fischer from making it his favorite weapon. That's true. But so a dangerous line of play, I would say, for both players. But in this, now that I'm looking at the position, just as we say, with beginner's eyes, or for the first time, it does look like this is too dangerous a line for Hikaru. So he didn't go for the pawn. Let's see what happened instead.
No, instead he played knight to c6 and revealed another purpose of his queen on b6.
Right.
So after knight c6, knight takes c6.
Right.
Usually in these types of Sicilians, we often like to take with the b pawn so that we can have the rook on the open file and also have plenty of control over d5. But this one's a little bit different because I feel that white might be able to get in a well-timed e5 here. Maybe
just simply immediately. And if you could, as white, force the trade of these two pawns, once white plays queen e2, and castles either side really, he's looking like he has a nice structure, and there are more targets and weaknesses in black's camp than white's.
Right. Normally when b takes c6 happens, it's pleasant for black because it improves the structure. But here we've actually hurt our structure, and the rook b8 idea is not even possible.
That's right.
So that might be one of the reasons that Nakamura decided to take with the queen. And of course now he can also play b5, and the e4 pawn is under threat. Now the negative side is that the d5 square looks like a juicy possibility for white someday, as is often true when you're on the white side of the Sicilian and black plays a line which doesn't include pawn to e6.
I once recall a conversation I had with the legend Ulf Andersson, grandmaster from Sweden, and really one of the world's great positional players. And I asked him, I said, Ulf, what do you think about the dragon? I was really intrigued by the dragon, and Tony Miles at the time was a big dragon fan.
I love the dragon.
I know. And you know what Ulf said to me? You can't play it. The dragon is unplayable. I said, what? The Sicilian dragon, one of the most dynamic variations in chess, is unplayable. Why? He said the d5 square is too weak.
Oh dear. But how was he having an opinion on a position with queens on the board?
You'll be surprised. Ulf studied a lot of variations in his life. He was a real chess lover, and he loved analyzing positions as well. But in this exact position, you really get an impression of what Ulf's talking about here, because if you're looking at that d5 square, you're going to move your queen, you're going to castle, you're going to play knight d5. It's quite obvious that white's play is simple and strong. Let's see how things develop from here. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to come back so that we can properly see the times.
Yeah, and let's also get an update, actually. After queen takes e6, white did castle kingside. So I think taking a cue from Ulf there and saying, like, I'm going to get the d5 square and not take a lot of risk by trying to castle queenside. So definitely an interesting point. Just the funny thing about Ulf is I hear this legend that he liked to play blitz chess without queens.
Yeah.
I just find that hilarious.
I know.
It's kind of a contradiction. Most people who play blitz want to go tack, 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 tack.
Right.
And then to do it without queens, it's just like interesting. Like, who does that?
Well, he's just a lover of the endgame. Here, in this case, white's e4 pawn is not hanging, this time for a different reason. You can't capture the pawn on e4. Remember Ulf's admonishment, the d5 square is too weak. In this case, There's a double attack against the queen as well as the knight. Black
if
doesn't.
only we were castled, knight takes c3 would be a great rejoinder. But here, unfortunately,
It's
in-between move met by counter in-between move.
With a check.
That's right.
With a check. You don't have time. Don't be reaching for your knight and capturing my queen. Reach for this bishop because it's checking your king. So that's why.
Which is a party.
Yeah, that's why knight takes e4 in that position was unplayable. Very quickly, by the way, quite surprisingly, Hikaru spanked down g5, g4 right away. So this position, Hikaru is saying, I know this one, I've studied, I'm playing g5, g4, and that is going for the attack, even though we're always taught that develop your pieces first and then look for the attack. Here, with his king in the center of the board, with his queenside pieces undeveloped, there's Hikaru, and we know he's temperamental and mercurial, but also dynamic, playing for the attack without having developed his pieces. This is a no-no, a cardinal sin in chess, but he's done it in the most important final round with everything up for grabs.
Yeah, and chess is very concrete. We've seen Nakamura make anti-positional moves before in this tournament and get the better of it. So this kind of along that same trend. I'm thinking about his b5 against Magnus Carlsen.
Right.
This looks
g5 and b5.
Right.
Yeah. So here we go again.
And I think the idea is that he wants to be able to develop that bishop on c8 in one move, and then where
he does it with a tempo, you mean? Yeah, exactly.
He's trying to castle. I don't know where he's trying to castle here.
We're both confused on that score. I would say that I'm not 100% sure I want to play the move f2, f3, potentially weakening my king shield. Something more along the lines of queen d3, playing for knight d5. That looks like it could lead to a sizable advantage for white, only because I don't like this structure for black, and in particular this pawn on h6. It looks like a weakness to me that really stands out like a sore thumb.
Things don't look quite right here for black because it just seems hard. Your coordination is starting to come together, but without the king and the rooks connecting, it's not quite there.
And exactly because of the
top
development.
Of D5.
Yeah.
I mean, D5. Even if we had our king, shuffled away,
right.
The D5 square would still be an issue. But it's kind of like the D5 square and the king position. It just seems that white should always have something up his sleeve.
Right. And again, these kinds of kingside attacks, when the center isn't fixed, is particularly dangerous for the second player, because Hikaru is always going to have to worry that a well-timed e4, e5 might just spin the position out of control, and he would be subject to a massive counterattack.
That's right. I mean, from a visual point of view, it looks really unpleasant for black, but it's a pretty concrete game, and
right.
Nakamura probably has analyzed these lines and maybe thinks that it's better than it looks.
Well, yeah, and well, here's the other one. When we're going to just take the position back one move, when Hikaru played the move g5, g4, essentially this really puts the onus on white, because this pawn on h3 is under attack. So it's 100% certain that Gata was going to capture this pawn on g4, and then, much to my surprise, it was Hikaru actually was thinking several minutes for what seems to us to be a very obvious move. He needed to develop and recapture the pawn, so bishop takes g4 was the most natural move, but it took him some time to actually make that decision, and rather surprising since everything is so forced and so concrete.
Well, you've talked about this before, how you don't understand how players think on forced moves. You think it's a waste of time.
Indeed.
And a mistake, but I mean, it seems like so many players do it. It's almost like they're trying to acquaint themselves psychologically, like center themselves, because usually at this level, time pressure, it's an issue, but with the 30-second increment, it's not like it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, a few minutes here and there is going to cause a disaster, especially for such a sharp player like Nakamura. For him, perhaps just reaching his psychological center is more important. And we saw that psychology is very important to him, wearing those sunglasses against Magnus, so that he didn't have to face a stare down.
Well, again, I mean, in chess, there's a lot of things that the players have to be aware of. Obviously, good moves speak the loudest, but sometimes time management can be key. We've seen a couple of time trouble mistakes. And, you know, sometimes when you sit there and you are in time trouble, you think to yourself, why did I spend 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes in the opening leaking my clock away over a forced decision? Hopefully it won't come back to bite Hikaru.
And we've got Grandmaster Maurice Ashley for his thoughts on the position now.
Well, Jen, I did a bit more digging into this line, and Black has to be a little bit careful here. Obviously, his pawn structure, his inability to castle, the queen coming out very early is all the sort of thing that we learned back in grade school. Don't do that to yourself. But of course, on the Grandmaster level, we break all the rules and play the exceptional ideas. That's how you win games. I did look at a game between Kasparov on the white side, I might add, versus Judith Polgar, a classic game that they played. And in this position, instead of bishop to b3, Gary actually castled here. Again, offering the delectable-looking pawn on e4, except Judith decided, nah, that one doesn't look tasty to me, because after knight takes, and the natural queen takes d4, looking like you're attacking a couple of pieces, maybe trading off queens up a pawn. This is met by the devastating knight takes d6 check right in the middle of the board, ripping the king's protection to shreds. And now this move queen to e2 check, and you can't block with this bishop obviously because of the trade on e6, and if you block with the other bishop, then the move rook to d1, chasing the queen, and after queen c5, a vicious sacrifice, rook takes on d6, kicking the legs from under this bishop, and after queen takes d6, bam, a bishop takes e5, hitting the queen and the rook. So there's some danger in trying to be greedy, grabbing that pawn, so we can understand why Nakamura, even against bishop b3, said, nah, I'm not interested. Back to you, Jen and Yas.
Those are nice examples of the types of tactics that Black is subjected to when your king is being left in the center. And that was typical Garry Kasparov fireworks, sparkling fireworks there in that game. We did see this move. I was a little reluctant. It's very nice in the opening to gain time by attacking your opponent's pieces. And this move, f2, f3, the bishop having attacked the queen, it's really nice to be able to return the favor with the move f2, f3. I actually like these pawns on f2 and g2 because they offer White's king great protection.
So you don't want to make that weakness with
I
f3.
don't. And I'm very unhappy that my queen is undeveloped. So in this case, rather than the move queen d1 to d3, which was my first instinctive move, Gada has just developed his queen with queen d2, and now he's preparing the very obvious rook on a1 to e1, followed by knight d5, and he's hoping that he's going to get a firm, safe advantage with this line of play.
Yeah, it definitely does look like a promising opening for White, but you know, a keen choice by Nakamura in that he wanted to try to play something dynamic today, but maybe his specific choice didn't quite work. We've got some great comments coming in to our hashtag, Sinquefield Cup. One said that Sam Thompson actually said that Lev said he would equalize first and then push to win. Therefore, Lev is playing for a win right now. And you're right, Sam. Levon did say that he was going to play an opening like this and play his normal chess, play to equalize, then see if he could push something out of it. Unfortunately, his opponent, Magnus Carlsen, makes the second part of that plan
a little bit harder than most. That's
very
right.
difficult. And we've also got a comment. We've got some comments in Spanish, so it's nice to see that we have people watching all over the world. We've got a comment from Tarjei Svensson, who's been tweeting at us all tournament. He's a journalist from Norway, and he makes a great point that if Magnus Carlsen wins the Sinquefield Cup, it will be his 11th tournament win out of his last 17 classical tournaments.
Wow.
And he uses the hashtag domination.
For sure.
Norwegian indeed.
Wow, that's like winning 11 out of 17 majors or something. That's just incredible. That's,
fantastic record. But
yes.
That's a big if, because we still got plenty of play here at the Sinquefield Cup. And we do have our namesake here, Rex Sinquefield, who founded the Chess Club and Scholastic Center in St. Louis here with Jeannie Sinquefield, his wife. And he's going to talk a little bit about the tournament and all the great things that are happening in St. Louis chess.
Boy, the St. Louis Chess Club will just let anybody in, huh?
I know, right? But we are very honored to have Rex Sinquefield with Grandmaster Maurice Ashley.
Thanks, Jen. With Rex Sinquefield, the sponsor of the Sinquefield Cup, the founder of the St. Louis Chess Club and Scholastic Center. Rex, I'm just wondering, how did you get that shirt? You know, they really just give it to anybody, don't they?
Apparently they do. They drop their standards. I got in line. I got one.
Well, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Rex, it's been such a tremendous tournament. It's been wonderful for us to talk about it. How have you felt about how things have transpired over this last week?
Oh, it's exceeded my wildest expectations. You know, what people outside the United States don't know is that St. Louis has a terrific reputation as a sports town. Now, right next to us, what they also don't know is Lester's, a very famous sports bar in the city of St. Louis. And yesterday it was filled to capacity. The manager said they've never had a crowd that big, and the same thing will happen today. And what drew those crowds? Not football or baseball, but chess match. This match was shown on every screen in Lester's sports bar, and it filled the place.
It's absolutely incredible. I think you guys have a football team or a baseball team. I'm not really sure about that. But you have a vision. You had a vision for chess. And now it seems to just be coming true in an incredible way. How are you going to do better than this?
You know, it's difficult. First of all, the way things have evolved, we have to give credit to the incredible staff that we have and to commentators like you and Yasser and Jennifer and the other folks. But the staff is amazing. It seems like everything we've tried has been amazingly successful, always exceeding our expectations. This match is no exception. You know, next year we want to do this again and perhaps make it a little larger. And we've been fortunate to host the U.S. Championship and the Women's Championship and the Junior Championship 5 years in a row. We'll do that again next year. So it's amazing. And our Scholastic effort, I repeat what I said the other day, Scholastic is in our title. That's really our mission, children. We're already in 100 schools. If you'd told me that 5 years ago, I'd have had you locked up in the loony bin.
Now tell me, why chess? Why is this Scholastic effort so important to you?
Well, because we know that chess is really good for children, and education is one of the things I care about deeply. And we really wanted to locate this club in or near the inner city of St. Louis so we could get to the most underprivileged schools and the most underprivileged kids. And we were fortunate in finding this space in one of the most incredible neighborhoods in the United States, the Central West End here in St. Louis. And so it's one of the callings I have in the public policy arena, and chess overlaps that in case of education.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask your Grandmaster opinion of these games. So what do you think about this position right now? I say that tongue-in-cheek, obviously.
I know you do. I know you do. I'm actually kind of interested in the way Nakamura's game evolved because, as Jennifer knows, I play the dragon a lot, and he sort of evolved into, what's it called, a Dragendorf?
Wow, man, quoting some inside lingo.
I know, that's okay, you can quote me. But so I'm intrigued by that position, and obviously I'm very interested in see how it goes.
Well, you're obviously a great fan for chess and a great sponsor for chess. We appreciate everything you do and the obvious astuteness you have in choosing us as broadcasters. And no matter how I try, I say it again, try otherwise, I always seem to end up liking you anyway. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. I've always questioned your judgment. And I didn't choose you. Joy chose you.
Touché. Rex Sinquefield, heck of a guy, sponsor of all things good in St. Louis. We are really blessed to have him on our show. Thank you so much, Rex.
Thank you.
Back to you, Jen and Yaz.
Good interview, Maurice.
Indeed, and our Twitter is blowing up with appreciation for the Sinquefields here in St. Louis. And there's one thing they caught on that Rex said that they love the most, and unsurprisingly, that is the intention to host us again next year.
Wonderful,
He's
and even
quoted.
to expand the field. Rex
That's right.
mentioned an expansion. But I'd just like to correct Rex for a moment. He's absolutely right about the staff, but it's not 100 schools. He's going to be shocked to realize it's actually 500 schools. So he's behind the times a bit. He doesn't realize how deep the reach of the St. Louis Chess Club has gone into the school systems here in the St. Louis.
Oh, it's incredible. Just really moving to see all that coincide. There's great Scholastic chess programs around the country, but the combination of the fantastic Scholastic chess program and the elite chess they bring here is unprecedented.
Right, that is nice.
And it's that combination of education and the caring for kids and the appreciation of this art form that I think will make it even longer lasting than any chess movement that we've had in America.
Right, and then you've got what you just referred to there in the art. Really, if you haven't visited, it's so beautiful. The World Chess Hall of Fame right across the street. On some of the montage of the videos that you saw some of those incredibly beautiful ebony and ivory sets. Just wow, it's definitely
phenomenal.
worth a visit.
And the World Chess Hall of Fame just turned 2 years old. So
Oh, happy birthday.
exactly. And let's take a look at some photos of the World Chess Hall of Fame. Well, that does give you goosebumps, that video. We got 5 years for the St. Louis Chess Club, 2 for the World Hall of Fame. It was great to see some of our top female players in America, our reigning women's champion,
you.
Irina Krash, holding high her oversized check.
Right.
We also saw Anna Zatansky and Rusudan Goliziani in there. And speaking of women's chess, the World Championship match over in China has been
underway. 3 games have been played.
3 games and 2.5 out of 3.
For the Chinese lady, Hu Yifan has taken a commanding lead over the reigning world champion from the Ukraine, Usinia.
That's right.
So wow, big things going on in China, even as we come to a dramatic finish ourselves.
And I was talking to my brother who founded the U.S. Chess School, and he's mentioned that women's chess seems to be going in a really good direction in America because you've got these great women's championships, but there's also a number of very young players right now who are 11, 12, already 2,000 players. So I have a feeling we're going to see, and a lot of that's this extra glamour and attention to chess. I think it really helps, especially for women, to take up the game. So I think we're going to see some really good things in American women's chess in the next 10 years.
Well, as we know, in the country of Georgia for decades has been leading women's chess. The strongest players in the world almost always came from Georgia, and Georgia culturally has really been supportive of women playing chess. But now that's really blossoming, and we are seeing, especially in China, that the Chinese Chess Federation is making a big push for women's chess in China. And China has been producing female world champions that have competed, and very successfully, I might add, against the Georgian ladies.
That's right. Yeah, and Clarissa Yip, I think she was covered in Time magazine recently, just 11 years old, already 2,000.
Wow.
So, yeah, some really nice things. So all the girls and women watching this, keep it up. We'd like to see a female participant one day, 2,700 plus playing in a tournament like this.
Absolutely.
It could happen.
And let me just go to some play for a moment. Major things have happened in the marquee matchup between the world number 1 and world's number 2. Black's position, Aronian, has taken some very consequent strategic decisions in this game. After the move bishop c4 was played, Magnus did not play the move h2, h3. He's basically saying to Levon Aronian, I'm not worried about this threat of knight f6 to g4. Levon Aronian said, well, shame on you. You should have been worried about the threat. I'm going to play knight g4 with a double attack against the pawn on f2 thanks to my bishop and knight. The rook had to pop up to e2, defending the f2 pawn, and now this huge strategic move by Aronian. I mentioned earlier that it was in Black's interest to trade those bishops. I didn't want to do it at the risk of a double pawn on e6, but Aronian took that risk. As we know strategically, this is long-term extremely damaging to Aronian, but short-term, Aronian is saying, look, I got this activity, I got the square, I'm controlling a lot of squares. We see the next pair of moves, h3, driving back the knight, and I think I'm caught up, I apologize, I'm not. One more move by Magnus Carlsen, rook e2 to e1.
Perhaps anticipating a further rerouting of the knight, h5 to f4.
Right, to dodge that, and perhaps also to get out of the way of a possible knight d4 in the near future.
Right, which
so
would potentially straighten Black's pawns out or allow for further activity.
Right, so some very bold play by Levon Aronian. He definitely has very active pieces. Again, I'll mention at the risk of overstating it, this rook on d8 is very well placed, but is this pawn structure, damaged pawn structure, worth the activity? Not so sure. I'm going to ask Maurice for his insight. Maurice.
Well, Yasser, this is something really interesting happening in this round today. We know it happens to all of us in final round play. You either need a win or a draw to secure first place, to secure the money. What do you do? Well, there's a quote that when you need a draw in the last round, you should play for a win. Don't start playing tepid chess, because that's a sure route to getting a bad position because you're not really trying anymore. In this game, it looks as though Magnus Carlsen is playing safety first and subsequently allowing Levon Aronian to take over the position. And in fact, at this moment, the computers like Black's position, despite that weird pawn structure you see there. I'd like to show you something that has happened in this game very quickly. In this moment, we saw Magnus capture on e5. One of the great strengths of Carlsen, I've noticed, is whenever he's playing for a win, he doesn't trade anything. He lets you trade. But in this case, he started the Hoover Fest by taking here, and then after queen takes d8, rook takes, and then we saw knight bd2, h6, play this small move a5, bishop to c5, and then bishop to c4. And it was in this moment, as you mentioned, Yaz, knight to g4, attacking the f2 pawn, rook up to e2, and then bishop to e6. And now he was attracted to the idea of trading himself, especially since the back rank was a little bit weak, but more trades on his part. And we should note this f-file is also open for Black. The move h3, now knight back to f6, and now the move rook e1. It looks as if he's shuffling back and forth again. We've seen him do this with his rooks before, back and forth shuffling. Not clear what he's doing, but right now the programs are saying it's black for choice in this position. Black has all the dynamism. He could play a move like knight to d4 now, entering the position, attacking this pawn, and after knight takes, then rook takes, and you can see the clear difference in activity between black's pieces and white's pieces. Not clear that this is the best line to go for, however. White may be able to go for a move like knight b3, but in this position there's even an active move, believe it or not, like g5. Another crazy line he might consider. I doubt Levon is going to go this sharp, but the computers are suggesting this line as well. Now I'd like to flip over to the other game because chess has all these principles, but it's often conflict. The other one is when you need a win in the last round, it often makes sense not to go for it, not to go crazy and sacrifice everything and act like you're a madman. It's to play solid chess. We've seen Kasparov do this before in the World Championship match against Karpov when he needed a win in the last game and played a ready system in one of their World Championships, played real quiet, let the tension build and build. Contrarily, in this game, we see Nakamura simply going for it with this wild position, breaking his structure up on the king side, as you can see here. So interesting strategies on the part of these top players, not your standard strategies in this situation, but we'll see how it works out for them as the games proceed here at the final round in the Sinquefield Cup. Back to you, Jen and Yaz.
Great point, Maurice. I mean, I was totally thinking about the same thing about that corollary. We hear so often that if you're playing for a draw, you should play for a win.
Right.
But how often do we hear that if you're playing for a win, you should first play to equalize? Well, Levon said it on the show yesterday.
Right.
But definitely a great point.
And when Maurice was talking about the rules and principles of strategies, I can't help but remember with a big, big smile my dear friend Grandmaster John Vanderbilt from Holland. He had gone to work and train with the legendary Victor Korchnoi. And during their analysis session, John suggested a move that violated our beloved opening principles. And Victor looked at him and said, "John, before you violate the rules of chess, you should first know them." It was one of the best put downs. I still laugh whenever I hear about the principles of chess. I think about that story. But a very nice point that you were making there, Maurice, about even though Levon has this awful, ugly pawn structure, he has some great activity. And although you said, Maurice, that the move g7, g5 is not the type of move that Levon might play, you know what? I really like that move. I like that move a great deal because Black has already burned his bridges, so to speak, in terms of the strategical side of things, and he's really got to go for it. And I like this idea of just playing for the attack with g5, g4. You're most likely that he won't play it, but I do like this move a lot. And I'm a positional player, but this is the most dynamic, aggressive approach that Black can take in this position.
So not disappointing us here.
Not at all. Not at all.
Even though queens are off the board, we have a pretty exciting and double-edged battle in our most likely deciding game of the Sinquefield Cup. Right. Now, in our Kamsky-Nakamura game, despite what Maurice said, I still like Nakamura's choice of playing the Sicilian. If we fault anything, it might be in retrospect the specific variation. But it's too early to say that, I think. I still feel like Nakamura has had some experience in these positions and might think it's a worthy positional gambit. We did get a question from one of our Twitter followers who said, shouldn't Nakamura castle?
Yes, you should.
Probably, here specifically, to be fair, they didn't ask in this position, but here, of course, it would just straight up drop a queen to castle.
Right.
Because Nakamura has played this move knight to d7 to open up his bishop and to, what else is knight d7 doing? Let's see.
Well, I was going to say, it's very, very dangerous. Don't do this at home, children and amateur players. Do castle. Bring your king into safety.
Especially in a semi-open position like this. I mean, this isn't like, it's not as open as a double king pawn, but that's why they call the Sicilian the classical, like, semi-open position, right?
Right.
It's not, you don't have any completely open files, but you have some trades, and that creates enough enough dynamism that usually keeping your king in the center is quite dangerous.
Exactly, very, very risky. And we've mentioned that this move e4, e5 hangs over black's position like the sword of Damocles. You have to be cognizant that this move e5 can blow open the position. So this retreat, if you will, knight d7, was, by Hikaru, was showing his awareness that he was concerned, very deeply concerned about the move e4, e5. So I see that as a defensive move to stop this.
Now
Well,
knight d5 on the board.
now Gada said, hey, listen, if you're going to step backwards, I'll step up. And again, a reference to Ulf Anderson and the whole Dragendorf?
Dragendorf.
Dragendorf? I hadn't heard
That's
that.
what Rex called it.
That mixture of the Najdorf as well as dragon. White stepped up. He said, look at that. Look at my pretty knight in the middle of the board.
Okay, and so that pawn on b2, let's be a little suicidal.
Okay, yes, I like it. I mean, I'm an old pawn grubber, so let's look at
Our
this.
position's pretty terrible, so it'd be nice if we could grab a pawn for our effort.
And have some, exactly. So bishop takes b2. Now here, at this moment, I'm kind of thinking that my rook need not attack your bishop.
That you're just gonna start attacking like queen f4 or something? Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm just going to swing over here with the idea that, look, your bishop may end up getting trapped off sides, and I think I'm threatening c2, c3. If your bishop went back, just to show one example of the type of dynamic opportunities that white has in the position, this bishop on h4, we've seen in that game between Garry Kasparov and Judith Polgar, how knight takes and bishop takes won. How about this line of play? Something along the ideas of, let me throw this move in first. Bishop on g3, coming down here, attacking this pawn on e7. And I'm really looking at opportunity to play queen f4.
Right.
So
like, for instance, if e6 in this position,
e6 in this position,
you might just play queen f4 here.
Queen f4. Actually, even looking at
you just
want
to stick your knight into e7.
I am. I'm really looking at that.
The tactical possibilities in this position for white are very rich. I mean, even after bishop b2, I'm looking for ways to maybe sacrifice my rook on a1, play queen f4.
Right.
There's going to be a load of tactics in this game, and
it looks too favorable. I think this is really, really too dangerous.
True. It's dangerous, but white does have to pick one line.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the thing. He's got so many promising opportunities, and it'll be difficult to find the right way to twist the knife here.
I don't know. It looks really, really promising for white. And this is not, I mean, I know Hikaru can be very provocative and grab pawns like that, but I think at this level against Kamsky in the last round, no.
My problem, though, is if I don't grab that pawn, I don't like my position that much either. You still have a lot of those same tactical ideas. Grandmaster Maurice Ashley has some thoughts on all this.
Jen, the engines agree with you 100%. They don't like Nakamura's position at all. Well, we didn't need them to tell us that. The position looks terrible. I mean, how did he get here? Well, he got real risky with the move g4. His pawn structure is weird. It's hard for him to castle. White's not doing anything. White's just putting pieces on good squares, and they look fantastic, and you can't make any simple moves to deal with that. The capture on b2 is actually the best suggestion, but we know engines are greedy to grab stuff. But if not, the idea you mentioned, yeah, c3 could happen. The rooks will just swing to the center, and this black king is going to be in a stare down, about to be slapped off the board. If bishop takes b2, very rambunctious line. There's some crazy lines to look at. Rook a b1. I picked one of them that was real entertaining. Check this out. Bishop to e5. And now bishop takes on e5, and the correct move is pawn takes, because if you were to play the move knight takes on e5, this nasty move shows up. Knight to b6, attacking the rook in the corner, threatening the move bishop to a4, pinning the king to the queen, and you can't touch this knight because of, bam, bishop takes, check, and after takes, a discovery on your queen. So that's a nasty line, which says after bishop takes on e5, you should take back with the pawn. And now things get even more weird after knight to e3, bishop to e6, and rook fd1, and things are just getting scary now. All of white's pieces mobilized. Black king still in the middle of the board. The computer gives b5 as the best move, and after bishop takes e6, your favorite move, Yaz, pawn takes on e6 to guard from the incursion on these squares. And it says white just has a smidgen of advantage here, should go for c4 and blast the game open as quickly as possible. Down a pawn will be white, but with some play, but not enough. Only 0.32, believe it or not, for white here in this position, saying that black still has great fighting chances. Man, chess is a crazy game. Back to you, Jen and Yaz.
Indeed. Nakamura waving a red flag in front of Gada Kamsky, and we're going to see how that goes and what attacking path of many to choose from Gada selects.
I have to say, that was an entertaining line. Thank you, Maurice, for sharing that, because the triplets on e7, e6, e5, you don't see that every day. And you know, we talk about weak double pawns, weak triple pawns. Victor Korchnoi would just be shaking his head saying, okay, I'm going to have to teach you guys more lessons on strategical play. But that was wild.
Yeah,
and
indeed,
only to think that it was slightly better for white. Boy, that really throws me backwards.
That's one of those positions that's very difficult to play for black, but
Yes.
Is Nakamura up to the task? We will find out more. We are going to take our first break here at the Sinquefield Cup, and don't go away. We're going to have a winner here in a few hours.
Darn, we have to go.
Welcome back to the Sinquefield Cup. We have our final round action here today, and we haven't been disappointed so far. Kamsky going for a super aggro treatment against Nakamura's Najdorf, even though he has nothing to win or lose in this game. So just going for it.
Well, absolutely. I feel great sympathy for Gada Kamsky, our U.S. champion in this event. He's played really bold, aggressive chess, and really he's been victimized more than anybody I can recall in a single tournament for his bold play. He's been the one who's been carrying a lot of the action, and he's doing it again today.
And not only not punished, but not sufficiently rewarded.
Well, that's the point. He's not been rewarded. He's been so victimized by counterattacks. And in this game, with this move, knight d5, he's challenged Hikaru to capture the pawn. Hikaru is in distress strategically, so Jen, he did take the pawn.
Might as well. You're going to get attacked. You might as well have a little pawn for
something in the pocket,
That's
right? Yeah, bishop takes b2 has been seen. And, oops, let me just refresh the board because I wanted to get the times. I apologize to the audience.
While we're waiting for you to do that, one of the things you mentioned about Gada Kamsky, it doesn't seem like he's playing that terribly. But you look at his score and it's like, wow, he's getting crushed. And I think that goes to show the strength of the tournament. And we actually have the world rankings here that underlies that. Number one player in the world with us for the first time in America, Magnus Carlsen. Not his first time in America, but his first time playing a major event here.
Exactly.
And he's last before the World Championship, which is a huge honor. Aronian, second in the world, also his first major tournament.
Exactly.
And Nakamura, our own homegrown talent here in the United States, number 5 in the world. That makes everybody, especially on the internet, very proud. And 26th in the world, Gada Kamsky. But sometimes he's number 10. As we mentioned yesterday, he kind of bounces around a lot, and that 26th in the world accounts for the fact that he hasn't had an easy time here at the Sinquefield Cup.
Absolutely. And the position is just blown open in the game between Gada Kamsky and Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru is going to have to wear a defensive hat in this encounter for many moves to come. We've seen this move, rook b1, bishop drop back to e5. Maurice was showing the remarkable line where you get tripled pawns,